Hi folks, this is Jason Moore with MTGOacademy.com, and this is the third episode of Dime a Dozen. We're looking at a new version of the Bird Keepers deck. If you're not familiar with that deck, it's a white weenie deck that I've put together built around War Falcon, which is a new one-drop from M13. So let's take a look at this deck right now. I'm playing 21 basic planes, and I'm playing 21 because nothing in our deck costs more than 3 converted mana cost. However, we do have some cards that require some additional mana input, and those cards include the Gideon's Lawkeeper, the equipment, the Bone Splitter, and the Viridian Longbow out of our sideboard, as well as the core Skyfisher. Sometimes we'll want to repurchase a creature and play that in the same turn. So I'm playing 21 lands, which is probably a little higher than most decks of this type will play, but I've always been a little bit on the high side when it comes to how many lands I put in the deck. I feel like most Pauper players are the opposite, and they're not playing enough lands. And I'm also playing all planes because I want to have the fastest possible mana development. Now, Secluded Steppe recently has become quite popular in the past week or so, and I considered playing that, but based on the field and how fast the other decks in this format are, I opted to play only basic planes so I could just come out of the gates as quickly as possible. So let's look at our spells in the deck. We've got 4 Bone Splitter, and this is a very crucial card in a few matchups. It's pretty much integral to the Blue-Red Post and Storm matchups because we want to be presenting a clock that they are hard-pressed to deal with. We need to force them to find answers and or a win condition in a small amount of time, a very small time window, and this will give us a good chance of killing them. It also lets our creatures match up very well against the creatures in Affinity, for instance, or in the mirror match. So the Bone Splitter is very important to a deck like this. We're also playing the 4 War Falcon, which is an aggressively costed 1-drop, but it requires that the bulk of our deck is cheap knights or soldiers so that this creature can always attack. So that's exactly what we're running with in basically almost every other slot in this deck. Got 4 Acacian Javelineer. This is one of the most popular 1-drops for any white weenie deck, and because it's a soldier, it fits perfectly here. It's very powerful against other creature decks, particularly fairies, and it's a removal spell on top of a body, and it can also be repurchased with core Skyfisher, so it's got all upside. We're also playing 2 Gideon's Lawkeeper. I wanted to play at least 10 to 14 1-drops, and there's a very good writer once said that 10 to 14 1-drops is ideal for an aggressive deck. So I try to stay at minimum with 10 1-drop creatures when I have the room for it, and this deck definitely wants those cheap creatures, so I opted for 2 Gideon's Lawkeeper. The other option is Doomed Traveler, which I could see an argument for, but I like that the Lawkeeper has a pseudo removal spell built in. Can remove a blocker or a very problematic attacker when we need it. We're also playing 4 Veteran Armorer, and this is a way to compensate for one of the weaknesses of the deck in the sense that the toughness of all of our creatures is 2 or less, with the exception of course Skyfisher. And this kind of shores up that problem. It also helps our creatures match up very well against opposing creatures. So the fact that it also pumps up our Squadron Hawk and our War Falcon is why we're playing this over the soldier-specific lords from M10. And we're playing 4 Squadron Hawk, which is neither a knight nor a soldier, but it provides card advantage and a built-in armada of evasive threats. So we want to be playing this card anyway because a lot of the time it's going to give us a very strong advantage in a given game. The Loyal Cathar is extremely powerful. It's essentially a built-in 2-for-1, can often attack into an enemy board with impunity and can stay back to block. It's great with equipment, and it's a soldier. It also synergizes very well with Core Skyfisher. So it's one of the best creatures we could possibly be playing. We're also playing Core Skyfisher, which seems to get better with each set that's released. Creatures are constantly being pushed. There's all kinds of enter the battlefield abilities that are being printed, and the Core Skyfisher takes advantage of that very well. It synergizes with our Javelineers, with our Journey to Nowheres, our Attended Knights, our Loyal Cathars, and even when we miss a land drop, we can pick that land up and replay it. So sometimes this is a card that just adds mana to our pool for a turn. So very strong card, and on top of all that, it's a flying 2/3 body for 2 mana. So very strong. We're playing 2 Journey to Nowhere, and I've tweaked the numbers on Journey to Nowhere a lot, and I think 2 is actually the optimal number. It's an inferior removal spell to unmake in a lot of instances. For instance, in the mirror and against Cloudpost, the mirror can often break your Journey to Nowheres, and that lets them get their creature back, and if that creature has any kind of enter the battlefield ability, they get to abuse it once again. And Cloudpost gets to do the same thing by using Capsize. So the Journey to Nowhere is sometimes not what we want to be playing, though in other matches it is great that it's a 2 mana exile spell. Now let's move on to our 3 drops. We've got this Singleton Guardian's Pledge, and this may look peculiar, but it's actually great as a one-of, as a Miser's Copy. It's a card that we can draw in the late game, and we also will never have to worry about it clogging up our hand with multiples. You'll never see 2 of these in your opening hand, and it really supplements our game plan of creating an overwhelming board position of cheap guys. So this is a card that you probably only need 1 copy of, because when you cast it, you're either going to be winning the game with an Alpha Strike for lethal damage, or you're going to be winning the game by swinging a race in your favor, irrevocably. You also can just blow them out in combat by using it as sort of a one-sided wrath. So the Guardian's Pledge, I think, is actually pretty strong. You could possibly even make arguments for playing more of this. It really gives you the opportunity to win games that you shouldn't be winning. Sometimes it is a bit win more, but on the whole, I think it's a pretty good addition. Now, 3 Unmake. This is a removal spell that is a little more expensive than the Journey to Nowhere, but in some matchups it's better because you have this instant speed bonus. You also have the unconditional exile. They're never going to be able to get their creature back if this resolves, and it's a multicolor spell, so it can hit cards like Guardian of the Guild Pack, etc. Lastly, we've got also from M13, 3 Attended Knight, and she's been impressing me quite a bit here. She is card advantage built into a creature. She's also got that first strike, which means she can attack into a lot of enemy boards. She's very good with Bone Splitter. And she gives you 2 relevant bodies for the War Falcon to keep attacking with. So I'm pretty happy with this main board here. Let's go ahead and look at my sideboard. I think it would be considered a little unorthodox, but I've actually taken the time out to make a sideboarding guide for about 14 or 15 different matchups. So believe it or not, this is actually a very robust sideboard that has a lot of applications. Starting with the Benevolent Unicorn, this is a very good card. In the matchups you want this card, it is insane sometimes. The Benevolent Unicorn, naturally, as you may have guessed, will come in against Storm. It hoses the Grape Shot combo kill, but it's also very strong against mono green aggressive decks, including Infect and Stompy. What it does for you there is it turns off their Hornet Stings, and Hornet Sting is one of their only answers to Standard Bearer. So if you can resolve the Unicorn and the Bearer, which I've done on a number of occasions, you essentially lock them out of the game, and that's a very comfortable position to be in. Now this this card can also come in against other matchups, including any deck that plays Death Spark, such as Goblins or Tortured Existence. It turns off the Death Spark. It can also come in against mono red burn decks, And if you want, you can bring it in against Cloud Post. It makes their removal a little less effective against you, turns off Seismic Shudder, and makes Rolling Thunder a bit worse. If they're trying to wipe your board, they're going to have to pump in some more mana. So we've also got 3 Disenchant, and the 3 Disenchant are in here because I wanted something that was cheap in terms of converted mana cost when we are only playing 21 land, and it's pretty versatile. It can come in against a lot of matchups. So the Disenchant will come in against White Weenie, which is the mirror match, against Journey to Nowhere, Bone Splitter, Razor Golems. It can come in against mono blue decks that play Spire Golems. It can come in against Cloud Post that plays Serrated Arrows. And it can also come in against Affinity, which plays a million different artifacts you can hit with it. The Standard Bearer comes in against those mono green decks that are playing a bunch of pump spells and auras, and it turns all of those off, which is really good. You can also bring it in against the Kiln Fiend and We Dragonauts deck because they're playing things like Assault Strobe and other pump spells. They're also playing a lot of burn spells, so it redirects all of those spells. And then we've got 4 Suture Priests. This is the only 4 of in the sideboard because in the matchups where you want Suture Priests, it's very good and it's even better in multiples. So you want to bring this in against the Storm decks that are playing Empty the Warrens, because it's going to make them lose a bunch of life when they cast that spell. You also can bring it against other decks that want to play a lot of creatures, such as Familiar Storm, and it's extremely good in the mirror match. That's why I'm playing 4. For all of those matchups, you just want to see this card in your opening hand, and you want to be able to play multiples to get more of an effect. And the last card is Viridian Longbow. This is probably the techiest card, the most unconventional, but I'm blowing the lid off of Viridian Longbow because people have not been playing it, and they should be, because this card absolutely body bags the mirror match like you wouldn't believe. It's repeatable removal. You essentially get to take out all of their Squadron Hawks, their Javelineers, their Suture Priests, and all of those cards are very relevant in that matchup. You can also bring in the Longbow against fairies, against goblins, pretty much any small creature deck around. It's going to be pretty strong for you. So it's a card that I hope we can demonstrate the effectiveness of. I'm playing 3 because I've tested the numbers a lot, and 3 is about where you want it. 2, you tend not to see it often enough, and like I said, it's just puts your opponent in a body bag if you're playing the mirror match or you're playing against fairies, though we do have a good matchup against fairies anyway, so it's not that necessary there. So that's the Bird Keepers deck. It's updated, it's ready to kick some butt, and I hope you guys stay tuned because we've got a full set of matches coming up right now. So check those out, and we will talk to you guys later.